Welcome to another episode of the Cackle, where we meet with Midwest changemakers and connect the dots between economic trends and the lived experiences of those people navigating them. I'm Emily Heinz. I'm the founder and managing director of Entry Point. At Entry Point, we partner with economic development organizations and nonprofits to foster inclusive and vibrant communities across the Midwest through research and community-focused programming. So if you're looking for an insider's take on the opportunities and challenges facing today's most inspiring change makers, you'll definitely want to join the conversation. And if you're looking for any research on the Midwest startup or small business community, you can check it out at entrypointmi.com. If this is your first time with us, welcome. And if you're a repeat cackler, we're glad to have you back. And with me today is Erin Amico, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at P33 Chicago. Yay!
Hi, Emily. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
You guys are so cool. So if anybody has not heard of P33, you've been living under a rock in the Midwest, at least. Because I feel like every time I'm like on Facebook or like doing anything, it's always like, oh, like this is the new thing going on with them, and they've got these cool people speaking and doing all this awesome stuff. So talk a little bit about your sort of journey to your background and what led you to your current role as the Chief Marketing Officer at P33.
For sure. So I sort of think of myself as a marketing generalist. I spent a ton of time on the client side, as they say. I worked for a bunch of different agencies, fortunate enough to work for and with some of what I consider are the most iconic and game-changing brands: Nike, Oracle, Morgan Stanley, Chicago Booth, etc. But I'm also incredibly civically engaged in Chicago. I'm a Chicago native, born and raised.
Okay.
And I would say one of the big draws for P33 in this role in particular was the ability to think about Chicago as an ecosystem and have the chance to change the narrative for what we stand for as a tech hub. Because as many of you hopefully know, we have a ton of strengths as a tech ecosystem, but oftentimes the perception of Chicago as a tech hub is not in line with the reality. So.
Yeah. I really love marketing. I'm like a marketing fangirl for sure. And one of those things, like starting Entry Point a few years ago, that I was like, was always kind of like, oh yeah, social media, but I've gotten a little bit more into like how as a small business owner you market your company, and like how kind of that like the sales funnel and like digital marketing and the difference between these things, and like looking at analytics and all those. So it's like someone who's sort of spent like 15 years in the marketing, branding, media experience, and you've like crafted stories for many organizations. Like, what guidance do you have for either startup founders or small business owners as they try to like get their name out there and attract customers and hire employees and grow their businesses? Especially, I feel like during the pandemic, when it's kind of like a difficult time to do all of that.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think oftentimes with marketing, there's a lot of like jargon and fluff around it. And it's like, what is it about? And what's the sort of value of it? I am a big believer that marketing at its core is just about connecting customers with value. So especially for small business owners, I think it's really, really important to be thoughtful about who your first customers are, because often those first 20 or so customers will become your advocates. So I think and what I've seen, a lot of small to mid-sized businesses try to be everything to everyone. We know, especially in a lot of the channels that you're mentioning, digital marketing and social media, it's a very crowded marketplace. Yeah. So having a real hard look on what is the value that you're bringing to a customer. And often your biggest success is going to be finding that very niche person or persona and making sure you make them happy, because they'll be your biggest champions.
Yeah, that is really, I think like in the social media age, it does seem like everybody's like, how many followers do you have? How many views do you have? Like those kinds of like metrics. But like if the right people aren't watching or paying attention, then it kind of doesn't translate into anything other than popularity. Like it's like, doesn't translate into money in your bank.
That's absolutely right. And the other thing I think that's really important and just cannot be underemphasized is the importance of PR. like a good PR piece just does wonders. Last year, my husband and I, we went to this glamping place, cutest place ever in Michigan. And it was because of a Chicago Tribune article. And
Oh,
that was like 90% of her business for the year. Like that one good PR spot just will do wonders. But I mean, I get it. A lot of times small business owners, like budgets are tight. They don't have a lot of time. So marketing's not always first on the docket.
yeah, definitely. And I feel like I definitely worked at some small organizations where like people like maybe board members or whatever leadership team hadn't grown up in the social media age
Yeah.
or like the whatever and are kind of like discount a lot of that and are like, no, like we build a thing, like you build a good product, the people will come and like do discount all of that. And it's like, no, why? So many cool things. I really like too how you kind of focus on like the storytelling aspect. Like, how do you weave that into kind of like portraying value to a customer?
Right. And I think it goes the sort of bucket of marketing I would think about that is thinking about your identity and what you stand for as a brand. And like any good story, every brand has a lot of the same characteristics. And knowing oftentimes the villain, what you're sort of going up against, is as important as knowing kind of what you stand for. So I'll give an example. There's a Kellogg professor that I admire a lot. And she says that great brands have to have very pointy points of view. And it kind of goes back to that notion of you can't be everything to everyone. So knowing oftentimes what you're not and what you're kind of pushing up against is as important. The example to kind of make it real, a brand with a very specific point of view would be something like Marie Kondo, who I don't know if you guys have like watched Netflix. I'm like really into that like phase, but her point of view is really that everything in your life should spark joy. So she's very much against clutter and having stuff just to have it. It's a very distinctive perspective. If I think about the brand of Chicago and what we stand for, our industries, et cetera, we're very much about the type of technology that's life sustaining, about food and ag, healthcare, manufacturing, that sort of tech that moves the world forward. And our quote enemy is sort of frivolous. So it's a long way of saying I think there's a lot that can be learned in the principles of just like good storytelling and good messaging that are very applicable to brand and thinking about your identity.
Yeah, that makes sense. And being like more clear. I think I am like a typical type of person that loves to like just talk a lot and has a lot of like at that like serve all the people and like be like, oh yeah, like all of this is so great. And I kind of like fangirl about a lot of things. So that is definitely like I think has been like starting at the beginning of the pandemic, like a big challenge for us of like we had one of our board members, Trey Boynton, who's at Cisco, is like I had breakfast with her just before the pandemic. And she was just like, I feel like people don't know what it is that you do. And I was like, no. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah, no, I don't think so. And so then I mean, luckily we had that conversation like in the beginning. Oh, she's actually on the Cackle in like but she we had that conversation in the beginning of February because then I like basically went back, asked like 10 other people, and they're like, I don't know, like something, you do something. And I was like, oh my gosh, you are all my enemies now. Like, no, and I think that like getting more specific and like being a little bit more clear and like weaving stories is just like has helped so much because then when the pandemic hit, it was kind of like people better know, otherwise goodbye to you.
But something you do so brilliantly, which so many people and organizations struggle with, is authenticity. And that's the one thing I, say to everybody, you have to be authentic, because especially now in this day of heightened sensitivity to marketing, to media, and so many other things, people can sniff something that doesn't feel authentic and real like in a second. So I think you're crushing it on and that matters to people. Like they want to feel, connected to real experiences and real conversations and all of it. So that's
yeah, especially now everyone's like, oh, just someone talk to me.
Someone besides my screen.
Where do you feel like people, so it's like if people are focusing first on kind of like who exactly their customer is and what they value, like what are the few of the challenges that you kind of repeatedly see like startups and small businesses or like even larger companies that you work with make just kind of on the marketing front?
Yeah, I think one is letting lack of budget stifle or paralyze them. There's a lot, like I get it. I'm at a nonprofit. We're not, we have budgets are tight, but there's so many things you can do that that aren't paid advertising. So thinking about things like the blog or the newsletter or the email marketing we're seeing during the pandemic is one of the most effective channels. So there's a lot of just kind of the free, I use the word scrappy a lot, kind of guerrilla marketing things that companies can do, even something as simple as the handwritten note to your customers to thank them. Like you wouldn't believe, especially in this time when we're craving human interaction, when we're craving that. Like I've spent much of my career in digital marketing. I'm a big proponent of social media and all of that. But there's something to that physical item that is still, really important. That gift. Thank you for shopping with us. That's really important. So I think the biggest mistake I see is saying like, oh, we don't have budgets, we don't have time for marketing. Let's do nothing. There's so many free and low cost things that you can explore. I think the other one is just a lack of familiarity or comfort with marketing in general. And the other thing I would just encourage is there's so many like free resources and like marketing 101 and things that you can just explore to say, okay, what do I need to think about as a small business owner? What should my first 90 days look like in terms of nurturing my customers and making sure that they're really bought into the process? So I guess those would be kind of two of the big ones.
Yeah, that is really interesting. How would you, this is probably like a very ambiguous question I shouldn't ask live on the internet. How would you kind of like define marketing? Because like I would traditionally not think like, oh yeah, like a handwritten thank you note, like in the package that you mail to somebody or like, or to a customer or something. It is like, I wouldn't think of that as marketing, but you're kind of right. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, like I could see that. So I guess like, what would your like definition of marketing be?
I literally think it's about connecting the customer with value in so many different ways. So you have, if you're whatever your product is, you're selling something, you have a good or a service, that's your business. And scaling that, growing that, producing that is what you do. Then you have an end customer, and oftentimes you have many end customers. Marketing is that connective tissue that bridges the gap between that customer and what you're offering. And it can come in the form of many different channels and avenues and ways. It can come in the form of phone calls. It can come in the form of emails. It can come in the form of digital media. But I really take a very kind of expansive view of marketing. And the other question I get a lot, I thought this is where you might go, is marketers talk about brand a lot. And I think brand is one of those terms that's like, what does that mean? And when I was talking to a lot of especially tech clients in my old life, I would sometimes just say brand is almost synonymous with reputation. That's probably the shorthand. But I think where a lot of people get stuck in thinking about brand is being fixated on the expression of brand and the physical things that you see, the logo, the ads, the colors, the Nike swoosh. But brand is essentially just, it's all of that. It's the sum of all of the different associations around your product or service that exist in the market, including what your customers think of you. It's the big macro picture. And it has to be large enough to encompass all of that.
Man. Oh, there's so many. So this will be a 3-hour episode of the Cackle. I was like, and then you will stay forever and help me. Yeah, I do find like the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know about like the world of marketing. And like there's so many facets to it now too, that it is like, you're right, like branding and storytelling and like the collateral materials or your website and like all the strategy around your website and social media. And then like you said, like we had a call recently with somebody, Laura Khalil, who was actually on the Cackle like back in November. Oh, the day after the election, it was like a nightmare. I was like, okay, I'm sorry, this is going to happen. We're going to talk, and it'll be the day after the election, but we don't know who is going to get elected. And go. But she was telling us about how, like, yeah, you can be really, really good at marketing and visibility and things, but then be really bad at translating that into like customers and stuff. And so I was like, oh my gosh, so many things.
So many things. And it's that complicated and that simple. And what I think is sort of like the core trait to do it well. So as you're thinking about your team, as you're a small business, if you know yourself and you don't have this ability, then find someone on your team that does. I think it really boils down to empathy. It's the same thing that makes good stories, but that ability to understand. So in the example you gave, like really understand your customer. So you can do all this stuff and just have all the right channels and be kind of checking all the right boxes. But if you're not kind of living and walking and breathing in your customer's shoes and saying like, well, what would he or she do? What would he or she want? I think that's what makes the difference between like good and great marketing, is that depth of empathy and understanding that you have for your customer.
Oh, it's so hard.
It is.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. I really like that. I'm like, I must go now. Click. So do you think, let me see if I like this question still. Usually I like ramble on about a bunch of stuff, and then I look at the question, I'm like, I don't even know what I was thinking here. Oh, okay. No, I love this question actually. Do you think some aspects of marketing a business have like pretty much forever changed since the pandemic, or do you feel like not really?
Yeah, I think since the pandemic, the biggest sort of wake up for a lot of marketers was the need to focus, I'm going to use another on identity and what they really stand for and purpose. I think especially for a lot of consumers, millennials, Gen Z, et cetera, that need to be connected with companies and brands that have purpose is critical. It's been exacerbated by a lot of the racial inequity that we've seen last year and a lot of the fragmentation that has really companies that are investing in kind of purpose-driven initiatives, I feel like are rising to the forefront. The pandemic has hurt budgets, so people have had to do more with less. Another, I think, big thing is it's changed the way in terms of like recruiting and thinking about your employer brand, if you will. We've seen the working landscape change, and so many companies are moving to decentralized workforces where their teams can be all over, which for a lot of times is a game changer. It opens the gates in terms of talent and possibilities and flexibility. And there's a lot of thought on, will that last? Is that kind of here to stay? So I think that's had a real impact. I hope that the focus on purpose-driven brands and kind of almost that like civic responsibility or CSR focus remains. I hope that stays.
What's CSR?
Corporate social responsibility. That sorry. Yeah, I didn't want to start there. But just kind of thinking about like not just the sort of doing good and what is the greater goal behind, what is the greater purpose behind why we exist.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And I kind of feel like that a little bit ties into like organizations now wanting to make a statement about like what their company's values are. And I think like that's like, I feel people have been kind of like, do we have a role in speaking in like racial inequity? Like, do we have a role in speaking on that as a software company? Do we have, do we say something or do we not say something kind of thing? I think that's been kind of interesting to see like a little bit more shape around like some organizations, like talking about values when they're talking about like what they do as an organization.
Right. And life has gotten harder in a lot of ways for marketers. Our consumers are, demanding more. I think the importance of creativity is at an all-time premium just because so many different areas are crowded and just full of advertisers. And now to your point about racial inequity, it's sort of like, okay, the statement's nice, but I hear a lot from communities, but what's the action behind it? what are you really doing? And a lot of backlash for just putting out statements without any sort of real action tied to it.
Yeah. Oh, those people. I'm just like, what? Why are you saying like, yeah, it's like the ones that like say like make a huge statement, and I was like, but yesterday, okay, we're just not going to talk about that one, okay? Yeah, talk a little bit about P33 because we just haven't touched on that yet. Like, so P33 Chicago launched about a year and a half ago.
About a year and a half ago. I think we officially became a 501c3 in 2019. And P33 is an organization. We're kind of a very data-driven bunch. So we were born out of just an immense amount of research and data, and truly a coming together of both our Chicago civic, corporate, academic, and various different sectors across Chicago. And when we did this research to sort of evaluate, like, let's take a real hard look at Chicago as a tech sector, we saw a lot of great stuff. We've got 35 Fortune 500 companies. We have the highest percentage of women-owned businesses in the nation, I think in the globe, last time I checked. Number one Excel incubator, university-backed incubator, 1871, 3 tier 1 universities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But by a lot of the measures that make a tech hub, a tier 1 tech hub, and tier 1 tech hubs being, think Silicon Valley, we're punching below our weight. We're not retaining and attracting the STEM talent like other markets. We're not seeing the same levels of VC funding and money flowing out or flowing through the economy. So long story short, we also saw from that research that those cities that became those tier 1 tech hubs didn't happen by accident. They happened because of an intentional effort to make them so. Yeah. So P33, in a nutshell, we are that intentional effort to turbocharge Chicago as a tech ecosystem.
Oh, I love that.
And the next question I always get is, okay, Erin, that sounds great, but what the heck are you doing? Where are you focusing on? That feels like kind of like vague. So I'll just say that quickly. I mentioned that we have these like great research universities. So one of the things we're like super focused on is how do we take that awesome science that's coming out of our labs, like Argonne Laboratory, Fermi Lab, and translate that into commercial impact, translate that to business. So commercializing science is a big focus area. The other thing that we're laser focused on is preparing the workforce of the future. So being able to attract and retain top tech talent. And then the other biggie for us is we're not just trying to make Chicago a tier 1 tech hub for a handful of demographics. We're really trying to do it for all our citizens. Mm-hmm. So focus on inclusivity and building an inclusive tech hub that is representative of the demographics of our city is mission critical as well.
Yeah, I also love like the data-driven approach. Like, I love I run a research organization, so I hope people are like that. I want more people to be like that. But yeah, like we regularly in research that we do on like the venture capital community, like it's like the Illinois is definitely like we've seen like the number of patents, the number of like the number of PhDs that are coming out of the universities, like dollars spent on research, like the metrics that you mentioned, there are just like it, and a lot of the Midwest states are like this, is that it's like you've got like top 10 in all of these metrics and across the entire country. And then you look at other things like amount of venture capital invested, like number of tech companies, like things like that. And it's like all of a sudden you're like 25 or something.
Yeah.
Out of 50 in the state. If people people are like 25, what? Yeah, so it's like 25th on the ranking of all the states. And so it is kind of like one of those things where like an intentional effort, like you said, in a lot of other regions, you've seen like these huge payoffs or like huge dividends over the course of like 20 years when they were like really focused on increasing those metrics because they already have all like the good bits.
That's right. And you said it, but it's a long game. This isn't something that can happen overnight. This is something, the reason everybody's like, well, what does P33 stand for? It's a nod to our legacy, but also our future. So it's a nod to our future ambition that we'll achieve this by 2033. So we're in it for the long haul. And also a little bit of a nod to the year 1933, which was the last Chicago World's Fair, when the world sort of turned and looked at this region as kind of like the mecca of innovation and technology.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, actually, one person, Hassan, on LinkedIn said that 100 years ago, Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland were the Silicon Valley of the United States. And I'm like, oh man, yeah, that is true. I'm like, once again, we'll be back. So you guys also recently launched Tech Rise, which was like the biggest thing ever. And so many people were like tweeting about that. I was like, could not tweet about it fast enough. Everyone was like, Jesus. So explain like what that is and like how the because it's kind of like a separate organization, like how they are tied together and what the purpose of that is.
Very connected to P33, but it is an initiative that we sort of created because very much how we work is we want to catalyze initiatives and solutions that will advance our ecosystem. So we were talking about the flow of VC funding. We know that nationally, only about 2.4% of VC funding is going to Black and Latinx tech founders. And in our region, it's down to even 1.9%. So TechRise in a nutshell is a way to provide resources, connectivity, and access very specifically to Black and Latinx founders. And to the point of data and kind of precision problem solving, we know that the solutions and the challenges that are faced by that group are not the same for general market. A lot of times where the struggle is for Black and Latinx tech founders is at the early stage, at the idea stage. And oftentimes they don't have that uncle or that friend or that family member to say, hey, I've got this great idea. Can you give me $5,000 to kind of kick it off? So through a series of pitch competitions, the first of which is starting April 16th, we are essentially making Chicago the friends and family of these tech founders. A handful of tech founders will come, pitch their idea, and we will give out up to, I think our initial total is like $5 million in grant funding and hopefully more after that as we get additional sponsors on board to essentially be that uncle and that friend and family for these founders. In addition to just the funding and the capital, we're also working with 1871 to provide mentorship, and they have something called their Black Accelerator, mentorship, connectivity, and network. We're also having the program includes a series of training and mentorships and just other resources that this group really, really needs. So if you want to find out more, if I hopefully I didn't butcher that too much, but the website is techrise.co.co, no M. But I would, it's a great initiative and just could not be more timely.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put that in the chat too. I bet Molly is like actively typing it as I. Yeah, I really like that too. Like we have done a lot of research on mostly in the last year, like the small business community and like where they access capital in different regions. And it is like just crazy how large the percentage is. It's like 46% of like the first money that anybody gets to like start their business is from friends and family. And so if you are from a low income community, or if you don't have like the connections of people that are like wealthier, then it is just like exponentially harder for you to even get started. So I think that's like such a that's smarty smarts over there. Whoever thought of that.
And the other thing is, talking about, I would be remiss if I didn't say, just as a region, there's just so much momentum that's happening right now that makes me so proud as a Chicagoan. If we look at our leadership and people like Roz Brewer, the CEO of Walgreens, and the trailblazers, Gary Cooper, who's on our board, who's the CEO of Reaply. These are just Black founders truly blazing new trails. Initiatives like Project Black and even the Tech Talent Labs at DPI. There's just a lot to be proud of in this regard in this region.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So, spring is here. People are getting vaccinated. Like the end is in sight. What is kind of like on the horizon for, P33, you personally, professionally, all the things?
Yeah, so vacation is still an open topic in my family. We are debating if we want to put the little ones on a plane to go visit family overseas. So ask me in a couple weeks and I'll see where that nets out. So I'm anticipating a great Chicago summer. I'm ready to hit the beach and get some sunshine in a socially distant, safe way. For P33, as I mentioned, like one of our big focuses is around talent. So we have an initiative that we're launching in the partnership with lots of leaders across the city and state to really try to attract our tech talent back to Chicago. And I'll follow up with more information on that, but that's something that's going to be kicking off in the next couple of months. So stay connected with P33 and look out for that. And we're especially focused on that tech talent that started in our region, that went to our schools, that has ties to the Midwest, but for whatever reason wasn't seeing our city and our state as a tech mecca and a tech hub. So they're like, oh, I'm gonna, peace out and go to California and work at Slack or Uber. There's so much richness. There's so many density. There's the startups that we have here, the corporations that are just doing radically innovative stuff in tech is just astounding. So that's a lot of summer at P33.
Yeah, scoop all those people right back on up. Start your family on in the Midwest. Yay. Well, thank you so much for being on. And then also thanks everyone for watching the Cackle today. And if you want to check out more on P33, we put their website in the comments. Molly did do that. She knew. And if you want to see any of our latest research, it's on entrypointmi.com. And remember, if you're interested in exploring strategies to better support the small business and startup community or be more inclusive in your programming, give us a shout. Yay. Okay. I will see you all later.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.